Good morning. I now reconvene the general session. Will the recording secretary take roll?
Kathleen Alvey, Kirsten Barnes, Catherine Williams Brown, C. Michael Cooney, Marisol Del Torre Escobedo, Anna Marie Francois, Makita Gwynno Shire, Johanna Howig, Alicia Hine, Terry Jackson, Bonnie Cla, Kevin Quinn, Jean Marks, Monica Martinez, Castle Redmond, Ade Rodriguez, Tina Sloan,
Here.
Andrew Wall. We have a quorum.
Thank you. I now recess the general session and move to the Educator Preparation Committee. Commissioner Rodriguez, will you reconvene the committee?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We are on item 5D. Item 5D is the review of the preconditions for single subject matter programs. This item is being presented by Hart Boyd and Miranda Gutierrez. This is an information item. Mr. Boyd, will you please begin?
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. This agenda item presents an analysis of the current precondition requirements related to the minimum number of units required to be in a commission-approved single subject matter program, and also proposes a plan to review the required number of units for each program. It should be noted that the Commission has recently begun thinking about how subject matter could be assessed in the future. However, we want to be clear that the item in front of you is not about that work. To provide a bit of context for this item, in June 2019, staff recommended prospective ways to streamline the SSM review process. Based on information presented in that item, the Commission acted to modify the SSM program standards and review process for prospective SSM programs. This action eliminated redundancy and eliminated requirements that were outside the scope of the content-specific subject matter requirements, which serve as the basis for the CSETs. This modified process brought the examination route and the subject matter program route into closer alignment in relation to demonstrating subject matter competency. In anticipation of bringing forward additional SSM streamlining work to the Commission, staff began developing this agenda item to look at the current subject matter competency requirement and ensuring that it is being implemented equitably for both exam and program route candidates. This work began with an examination of all SSM preconditions which specify the total number of units required by an SSM program. The preconditions also specify that the total number of units be broken into two separate categories, with one focusing on the core requirements of the program and the other on a depth of study in the content area. However, with the preconditions specifying that SSM programs must consist of both core requirements and a depth of study, the total unit count for the majority of SSM programs raises to a range of 42 to 48 semester units. Based on this information, the Commission staff has heard from a number of institutions that it's extremely difficult to fit an entire SSM program into one of the college majors due to the considerable unit count required by the preconditions. When taking this into account, a potential reduction in the unit requirement would likely allow SSM programs to integrate more effectively into existing college majors. Now I'm going to turn it over to Miranda to go into more specifics regarding SSM program core requirements and the depth of study.
So when staff reviewed the preconditions, it was noted that many of the core requirements correspond with the domains of the SMRs and that the depth of study requirements are a supplement to the core of the program. And those exceed the requirements of the subject matter requirements that make up the CSET exams. So in this item, we included an appendix which begins on page 4. The table lists each content area, the CSET subject matter requirement domains for the content area, the core requirements based on the preconditions, and the units for both the core and depth of study requirements. Depending on the content area, the depth of study ranges from 9 to 21 units that do not directly address the SMRs. These additional units that make up the depth of study in the SSM programs go beyond the knowledge a candidate electing to take the CSET is required to demonstrate. Since the SSM programs and the CSET satisfy the same requirement, they should be as aligned as possible. When looking at ways to create more equity between the exam and program route for candidates, staff identified the SSM program preconditions as an area that could better align the subject matter competency routes for candidates taking the exam and candidates completing a program. As Hart mentioned, we've heard from institutions that it's difficult to fit an SSM program into a college major due to the high unit requirement set in the preconditions for both the core requirements and the depth of study. When staff looked at the depth of study, we found that it does not directly address the SMRs, which serve as the basis for the CSET exams. When considering the unit count of an SSM program without a depth of study, which could be about 32 units for most programs, institutions could have more flexibility in fitting an SSM program into a college major or degree program, while candidates would have a more equitable route to subject matter competency. It should be noted that in this item, it's not suggesting that SSM candidates not complete university coursework that provides additional depth in the content area. However, these could be degree requirements rather than program requirements set by an institution. To continue this work, staff plans to consult with subject matter experts in each content area for a thorough analysis of the core requirements and the depth of study for the SSM programs. The work plan includes convening subject matter experts to solicit their input on these matters. The initial focus would be in the areas of English, math, science, and social science. So in this item, there are 2 questions for consideration beginning on the top of page 3. The first question is whether SSM programs need to require 32 to 48 units to be commission approved, and whether the depth of study should still be a requirement for candidates completing a commission-approved SSM, particularly when viewed in relation to the knowledge candidates taking the CSET are expected to demonstrate. Staff's asking that the Commission discuss the 2 questions, and based on the discussion, staff plans to convene the subject matter experts, again, initially in English, math, science, and social science, to discuss the preconditions as they relate to the SSM programs and the expectations for candidates demonstrating subject matter competency. Staff will facilitate the work with the subject matter experts and bring a future item with updates and, if appropriate, recommendations from the subject matter groups. This concludes our item, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so we will open for public comment. However, showing no public comment cards, public comment is now closed. Commissioners, would you like to ask questions or make comments on this item? Commissioner Klatt?
I don't think we have, thank you, first of all, for bringing this to us. And I don't think we have any way to make this happen. So it's more of just a request of, I guess, going out to colleges. And maybe things have changed since I went to college. That was a long time ago now. But I remember having a degree in English, from a 4-year university and going to apply to a teaching program. And I couldn't find one that I could get into straight out of my 4-year program because I think at the time there were 2 courses that I didn't take within my major that it never occurred to me I would have needed to have taken. And so I took a year off. It worked out okay. I got my master's degree in the meantime. But I could have easily taken those 2 courses over the course of my 4-year degree if I had known that would have been a requirement. It wasn't in my course catalog that. So I'm wondering, and again, we can't, I think, mandate this, but maybe it's changed, but when students look up their course of study for their 4-year degree, if there was something there in each degree that said, oh, if you're thinking of becoming a teacher someday, here's what in your degree you would need in order to be able to enter a credential program when you're done. So it's more just wishful thinking, but just throwing it out there.
Thank you, Commissioner Klatt. Commissioner Wall?
Well, this is a fantastic item. Because I know that there's lots of efforts going on to do more subject matter integration waivers. And so the biggest thing that I hear is the credit hour. So take that as feedback about the number of hours that then it is required and how that may or may not correspond to what the hours are currently required for a major. And there are so many politics that go into how many hours are required for a major in undergraduate education that I can say that we are not going to be the driver of how many hours it is. And so I think one of the questions that we should look at is how many hours are majors currently, right, and at different institutions, and how does our expectation align with that? Because thinking that we're going to drive how many hours for any given major there are, I think is unrealistic, just practically. So I think this is a great item to explore. I really applaud the examination of it. I think it's super important.
Commissioner Sloan?
I agree. Thank you for bringing this item. This has been one of the things that we worked on over time. So getting the approval process better aligned has really helped. We've said for a long time, it's been a burden on programs trying to create these pathways because there are so many requirements. And Commissioner Wall is right. These are the same things that I hear in higher ed is the unit. So gathering together experts to figure out the unit and the hours is a great idea. At the same time, I'm wondering if we can use this expert panel to help advise us on what are, in their opinion, the core requirements in subject area prior to becoming a teacher. Right now, we have this structure where we have these SMRs, we have these blueprints for the C-sets, and we have to make sure they're aligned. That's what we have at the moment. But we've talked about, and we plan to, in future, move down a road to determine what is it that's really critical, and are the way the C-set's currently structured really what we need to be assessing in terms of background content knowledge prior to going into teaching. So this may be an opportunity to just get some feedback on that to help us think about what our next steps might be there. But certainly this is a very good first step in aligning these subject matter programs with what's required on the CSET. At the same time, I think we want to be careful, just like in our discussion yesterday with around literacy, that the specifications for exams can be pretty detailed. And again, I don't know enough about the process that you all are going through versus standards for programs or TPEs aren't at that granular level. So trying to figure out what's the right granular level too for our SMPPs would be important. Final thing I'll say is that anecdotally, I think we have seen and would agree that going through a subject matter preparation program is going to prepare you better for the content that you're going to be teaching than studying for and taking an exam, because you get to experience the ways in which the content is taught in addition to learning the content. You get to experience the ways in which children and adolescents learn the content. More than just studying it. So it's a pathway we really want to make sure can exist and be robust and be doable for students and faculty. So thank you for bringing this, and I think this is a great first step.
Yes, Commissioner Brown?
And as someone who represents the community colleges, the more streamlining and clarity we can have, the more we can begin the work of helping people consider that they want to become a teacher early on in their academic career in an institution of higher ed. And I know I've said this before, but if we want our future teachers to look like the children of California, then we really need to be sure that we're including the community colleges, which is an affordable way for many people to start their university.
Yes, Commissioner Sloan?
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. I wanted to just echo that and add to that is something else that several of us in the higher ed community have been thinking about, and people in community college and four-year institutions, about how do we, can they start, subject matter preparation pathway in the community college, in the community colleges, and then, transfer. There's some higher education, or higher division units that are required and things like that, I would imagine. But it's something else for us to see if there's ways of ensuring that we don't have unnecessary barriers to creating those kinds of pathways. Great, thanks.
Commissioners, any other comments? Okay, so this is an information item. No action is needed at this time. And I believe that I think you got some good feedback. And thank you. Mr. Boyd and Ms. Gutierrez. All right, we're moving on to 5E. And I'll wait for Ms. Roby to settle in. Okay, welcome. Item 5E is the initial institutional approval, Stage 2, eligibility requirements for Los Angeles Pacific University. This item is being presented by Lynette Roby. This is an action item. Ms. Roby, will you please begin?
I will. Thank you. Good morning. Last time. So this item, 5E, which is for your consideration and possible approval, is the presentation of the Stage 2 eligibility requirements for Los Angeles Pacific University. Los Angeles Pacific University, which I'm going to say LAPU from here on out, is seeking initial institutional approval to become eligible for a preliminary multiple subject credential program. LAPU, just so you know, was formerly a part of Azusa Pacific University, but has since separated, and as a separate entity has received WASC senior accreditation. We have with us today, representing LAPU, Dr. Craig Brewer, Dean, and Gordon Jorgensen, and I hope I present Assistant Dean. They are available to answer any of your questions about their submission of the 12 eligibility requirements. Stage 2 is illustrated on the table on page 3 of the item, and as we always state, approval of Stage 2 of the initial institutional approval does not allow an institution to begin offering the educator preparation program, but only approves them to move to Stage 3. And at Stage 3, they would submit preconditions and common standards for review, and after that review, LAPU would be required to come before you again for consideration for provisional approval. A copy of LAPU's complete eligibility requirements has been provided as a hyperlink on page 1 of the agenda item. On page 4 in this item is a table that includes staff recommendations for eligibility requirements 1 through 9. Upon review of the responses for 1 through 9 and the evidence provided by the institution, staff recommendation for each of these criteria is that of aligned. Beginning on page 6 of the item are summaries of the institution's responses to Criterion 10, which is mission and vision, Criterion 11, which is history of prior experience and effectiveness in educator preparation, and Criterion 12, which is capacity and resources. As you know, staff does not make recommendations for these 3 criteria, but has provided brief summaries for each of the institution's responses. I just want to note that in Criterion 11, history of prior experience, an institution is required to post a third-party notification on their website, which invites any comments from stakeholders to be submitted, stakeholders and public. To date, no comments have been received. So in light of the information provided in the agenda item regarding Los Angeles Pacific University, staff recommends that the Commission consider taking one of the following possible actions. 1, grant eligibility, or 2, deny eligibility. However, if the Commission grants eligibility, it may identify topics that it will look for in Stage 3. If the Commission denies eligibility, it may identify what it sees as missing in the current submission in the event that the institution decides to continue to work towards initial institutional approval. Staff is happy to answer any questions regarding the initial institutional approval process. And again, we have representatives from LAPU here to answer any questions about the program and their submission. Thank you.
Would you like to make a statement, or we'll open it up to public comment? We don't have any public comment cards on this item, so we'll close public comment. And commissioners, do you have any questions? Chair Sloan?
Good morning. Welcome. I do have a couple of questions. That was clarifying. So you are planning to offer the credential program entirely online, and I wanted to get a better sense of what that looks like for courses and supervision and schools that you would work with.
Yeah, thanks. The courses are offered fully online. As far as supervision goes, we'll still have clinical supervisors, placement coordinators that help us work the MOUs with the different school districts where the candidates will be placed. Probably the biggest difference between our program, our proposed program, and a traditional program is that clinical supervisors will not physically go to the school sites to hold the supervision events. And what they'll do is the students will video record themselves. They'll upload that video through software that's called GoReact. And then the cool thing about GoReact is it allows dual inputs over the video. The students can lay comments over the video of themselves, either verbally, they can video record and put other videos on top of their video, they can type comments in, and the clinical supervisor can do the same thing. So they'll get this kind of dynamic dual input situation, which I think is probably a little better than when I went through my credential program a few years ago. Where we would just get a report from our clinical supervisor at the end. You know, they would leave the piece of paper because we would continue on teaching, and we would follow up with them later if they had any comments or questions. But in our proposed system, they'll interact via online through that GoReact software. So that's probably the biggest difference than a traditional credentialing program. Everything else is pretty much the same in terms of us adhering to the TK-12 standards and frameworks. You know, we'll make sure that we do all those things in terms of the courses that we'll be teaching. But the clinical supervision will definitely be a different approach than traditional.
And which schools are you planning to work with, and which districts?
Our first partner is Baldwin Park Unified. It's the district that I came from. And then we have relationships with lots of schools in the San Gabriel Valley. The other districts who we will interact with really will depend on who the students are, because we're really preparing this program to meet student needs across the entire state, regardless of the fact that we're in San Dimas. And so if we get a student that's in Eureka, we'll contact the local school district up there, pursue an MOU with them, obviously hire a master teacher that works in their district, and then bridge those partnerships that way. So it'll kind of depend on where the students are coming from. One thing we do know about our student body, even though we're a fully online school, about 80% of our students live within 75 miles of our campus. And so because of our relationship with APU, we have relationships with a lot of school districts already. It's not going to be a big issue other than just preparing new MOUs because they'll have our name on them instead of APU's name on them.
And then regarding the online courses, are they mostly asynchronous, or will there be synchronous pieces to them?
Yeah, they're largely asynchronous in their setup, but many of our courses include synchronous modules with them. We actually use a platform called Zoom to conduct those meetings that are in person and synchronous with students. Biggest reason we use Zoom is because it's easy to record the meetings when we want to. It's really amazing software because it'll give you an actual verbatim transcript of the entire meeting. It's not the greatest, but it's close. And so it's a mixture of both, but mostly it's asynchronous. And the reason we do that is we're trying to meet the flexibility needs of our students. Most of our students are working full-time, and they just have little pockets of time where they're trying to fit this thing they call school into. And so most of it's asynchronous, but there are synchronous pieces built in too.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to let other commissioners.
Paul?
Can you describe your faculty for us?
Yeah, we intentionally hire practitioners We probably will not hire a full-time faculty member for this program until we get at least 20 students in the program. Our business model is set up that way. We'll use probably primarily adjunct instructors for most of the courses initially. And being from public ed, I have lots of contacts around. I don't prefer the traditionalist approach of ivory tower faculty who haven't been in a K-12 classroom in eons and years. I'd rather have somebody who's out in the field who wants to come in and help our students learn what's going on in schools today. So those are the kind of folks that we pursue to be our faculty.
Commissioner Brown, and then Student Representative Hsu.
What kind of connection do the faculty have with the, not just the site itself, but the supervising teacher? Anything?
I'm sorry. If they're faculty teaching the credential courses, they probably wouldn't have any relationship with the master teachers that are out in the field. The clinical supervisors absolutely will. I could see there probably being some of our adjunct faculty in a dual role where they maybe are teaching a methods class and they're also doing clinical supervision for us. So that's possible, but
Just help me understand that. I just wanted to go a little one step. When you talk about clinical supervisors, is that a member of your faculty? Or is that the person who is the master teacher in the classroom?
the master teacher in the classroom is a regular teacher.
Yeah.
They're regularly assigned to that teacher.
Do they have any contact with your college or faculty that's, or not?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
We plan to offer an orientation for them so they know what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, what's different about us than maybe traditional programs they've had in the past. So yeah, they'll have those connections for sure.
Hi, good morning. I have two questions. Since it is an online program, are your student teachers going to be seeing more than one classroom? Are they going to be doing their hours in more than one classroom? Or are they doing all their hours in one?
We'll make them do part of their placement in a primary level, K-3, and then the other part in 4-6.
Okay, awesome. And then my other question, since I got my credential in special education, I'm a little bit biased, but so I always ask this question: how much are your students? I mean, because I know that it's multiple subject, but how many courses, if any, are going to be in regards to working with a student with a specific learning disability or any special need?
Yeah, we do have one dedicated course for that because, as you know, mainstream students, the population of them is growing and growing and growing, especially over the last probably 10 to 15 years. So we owe it to them to train them to be ready for that type of situation for sure.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question too. How open are you as a school to offer placement to a student teacher who is really committed to a specific school that offers a different curriculum or a different population of children? Do you feel that you have the flexibility to provide that opportunity?
I would say as long as the school district is willing to make that connection with us, we would absolutely be okay with that. The kind of one of the big things that we're trying to do is, you know, being able to go to school and get a teaching credential is easy if you live close to an urban area that has universities or colleges. If you aren't close to them, it's very difficult. And traditionally what happens is a lot of teachers get jobs in those remote areas and they're not used to the culture of that community, or they don't understand the differences of different communities. So what we're hoping is to make the education piece more accessible to them so that people who are from those communities can get their degrees, get their credentials, be teachers in their communities, and make a better influence. Yeah.
I have not to act too amateurish, but can you give me a picture of a synchronous conversation? I mean, I know it's telecommuting, but I need a picture of what that looks like.
It would be a telecommuting situation where you're sitting at your computer, I'm at mine, we can see each other through the video feed and through the audio. Yeah.
I just think it's great that you're offering a program that is accessible for people who might have families or who have other things going on in life that can't get out and go into the classroom. I've taken a lot of online classes in the past 5 years, and it's really very helpful for people in my situation and similar situations. So I think it's really great. I think you've done everything that we've asked for you for stage 2, and so I would like to move to grant eligibility. Sorry, I forgot the name of your school. To Los Angeles Pacific University.
I've taught and I'm currently teaching an online section of subject area pedagogy. And I've tried Zoom, I am doing Zoom and Kaltura Media, and I'm trying to make it work every semester. But I'm not convinced that it's the best format for our student-teacher candidates. Having said that, my candidates do have a face-to-face opportunity and, in some other courses. And at the end of the semester, I get feedback from the students, and some say, they mention the distance. Some are 60, 70 miles away. This is the best format that works for me, and so forth, in terms of making it work with their schedule. But what feedback are you getting from students in terms of this online format? Yeah.
I'm doing it. I would say that the overwhelming positive feedback that we get from students is over accessibility and flexibility. And that is the magic of online. Do students also comment about being able to interact with, I think, I teach online math. I think my students enjoy my online class than when I have taught the class face to face, because I'm probably a little more overly accessible than your average faculty member. A cell phone doesn't bother me. I take phone calls at home at night. I text. I FaceTime. It doesn't matter to me. When we are able to hire faculty that have that approach to the learning interaction, I think it is better than face-to-face. Because most of the time, as a face-to-face student, if you have a question, you're not in class. You're at home or driving to work, you think of something. And if you remember to ask when you get back into the classroom the next week, it's just not as dynamic as if I can call you right now or send you a text right now and get that kind of feedback immediately. I think as the years have gone by and the technology has gotten better, that students are super comfortable with the online interface. And so I see students wanting online more than face-to-face simply because they feel like they learn as much or more, and it's far more flexible and accessible for them.
I just want to echo the commissioner's remarks. I taught such a class last night after the meeting ended. And I also echo your comments about availability, but a concern I think as you move forward is to think very carefully about the variability in adjunct faculty, and how do you ensure that the kind of responsiveness you're talking about is actually integrated in a part-time workforce. I think that's an immensely complex and an important issue to really take up as you think about ensuring the highest quality experience for students.
Commissioner Martinez?
Hi. My question is less about the online component and more about your vision and mission. So I was curious, what is driving the interest specifically in multiple subject, offering that credential? And then my second question is related to the vision and mission of the program as well as the institution, but what does a faith-based course of study look like? And how will this intersect with the multiple subject credential?
Yeah, thank you. The faith-based components, we are a Christian university, absolutely, and we teach from that worldview, both in terms of ethics and morals. The thing I love most about it is the passion for loving kids. It's a biblical concept. You know, Jesus said himself, there's really only two things: love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love others. And I believe that our program helps people frame the profession in that way of valuing kids. I think back to when I was a principal, and I would interview teaching candidates, and I would tell my panels all the time, there are lots of things we can teach these folks. We can teach them how to make lesson plans, how to do classroom management, how to be responsible when it comes to interacting with parents. But if they don't have the heart of a teacher, if they won't jump in front of the train for the most poor behaved or disadvantaged kids, I just wouldn't hire them, because I can teach all those other things. I can't teach the heart. And so our program focuses on those kinds of things, on how we value others and how we value kids. So that's where I would say most of the influence comes in. Obviously to ethics and morals, doing the right things. And I'm sorry, I forgot the first question.
What was driving the multiple?
We have had a liberal studies bachelor's degree for almost a little over 20 years now. And before, when we were still part of APU, those graduates went into the School of Ed's credential program. So since our separation and pursuing our own accreditation with WASC, students will still go to APU, but we're having more and more of them tell us, I need to stay online. And our program at APU is still traditional. They got to go to class in person 2 nights a week. So that's the driving force.
So, commissioners, we do have a motion on the floor, and we're at stage 2 here, and I think some of the questions are going into stage 3, and so we're going to call for a vote. All right, well, see, when we have a motion on the floor, we're done interacting with them. It's our comments, and so, okay, yeah, go ahead. Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And
Then I didn't have my mic on, I guess.
Co-Chair Hine just told me that's exactly what stage 2 is for.
Okay, thank
Okay? All right. So, Commissioner Klatt, would you like to make a motion?
So related to the motion,
Yes.
I'm inclined to support the motion. I think that the conditions are there to come back. One thing I am still a little unclear on and would like more for at stage 3, I would expect more, is the relationship between your supervisors and the master teachers, how that will actually work in these, especially if it's remote, and what that relationship will look like. So that is something that I would really want to see more of at the next stage. Yeah.
Commissioner Hine, will you amend your motion, your original motion, or? Okay.
To clarify, I don't think that needs to be part of the motion.
Okay, so it's just.
I just want
all right.
to
Excellent.
say that.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Commissioner Marks. And this is an action item. So we're going to call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you. I really thank each and every one of you. This has been an awesome adventure, and I will miss it. And I want to thank staff and everyone for all of the support. I know this is kind of off the record, but just thank you so much. And the work you do is so amazing.
All right, commissioners, this is another institutional approval. However, this is stage 3. And it's eligibility requirements for Alameda County Office of Education. This item is being presented by Hart Boyd. It's an action item. Mr. Boyd, will you please begin?
Yes, thank you. This item presents Alameda County Office of Education's responses to the 2 initial program preconditions, all relevant program-specific preconditions, and the common standards for the Commission's consideration and possible provisional approval as we are in stage 3 of the initial institutional approval process. You can see this highlighted on the chart on page 2 of the item. As a reminder, although provisional approval authorizes an institution to offer educator preparation programs, each of the proposed programs must still go through the initial program review process in stage 4 to determine alignment to the program standards. These programs will then be brought before the Committee on Accreditation, who may either approve or deny the programs. At the table, we have Derek Gorshow, Program Manager, and he will be here to answer any institutional or program questions you may have. Alameda County Office of Education has submitted all the required program preconditions, including the 2 initial program preconditions and all program-specific preconditions. The review of the preconditions submitted by Alameda County Office of Education was completed by staff, and all have been found to be met. A summary of these responses can be found on pages 3 to 9, and a link to the institution's full preconditions responses can be found on page 3. Alameda County Office of Education has also submitted responses to the common standards, and this submission was reviewed by a team of 2 Board of Institutional Review members. The team collaborated and came to a consensus on the final finding of aligned on all common standards. A summary is provided of Alameda County Office of Education's responses to the common standards and begins on page 9. Also, a link to their full common standards response can be found on page 9 as well. Based on the findings of met for all preconditions and aligned for the common standards, staff would like to recommend provisional approval for Alameda County Office of Education. It is recommended that the provisional approval be for a period of 3 years, so that in the 3rd year a site visit could occur and data could be collected. After the site visit, a report would be completed and brought before the Commission for consideration of full approval. With that, staff is available for any process questions, and again, we have a representative from Alameda County Office of Education to answer any institutional or programmatic questions.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. So this will now open for public comment. See no public comment. Public comment is now closed. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Comments? Commissioner Brown?
I see that you have a collaboration, CTE program stakeholders from Chabot College. And could you just talk a little bit about that?
Right now, as part of a K-12 Strong Workforce program grant, we have relationships with Chabot and Peralta, and we are working with them and local high schools to create pathways for students to have find pathways through high school into community college and beyond. And we're working with Chabot in particular in a number of pathway areas in the CTE sectors.
Mm-hmm. Commissioners, any other comments or questions? Commissioner Sloan?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you talk a little bit more about the CTE program and who you're focusing it towards? Is it secondary teachers who want to earn their CTE credentials, or is it anyone who wants to? How do you?
Well, we want to focus on schools that have high need for the CTE teachers, and there's a great demand. Right now, there's just not enough CTE teachers available in our area.
Yep.
The closest institution that offers a CTE credentialing program is UC Berkeley Extension, and they're really the only other one around us. It's a big county. There are a lot of districts, and we're helping fill the need.
Agreed. And are you focusing on particular areas? Sorry, I didn't.
Of specific sectors? No, the program is designed to give a general CTE experience for teachers who may be in any one of the 15 CTE industry sectors. So each teacher will be focusing on the standards that are specific to their sector as part of the program, but it's a general program serving any teacher with any background in any industry.
Good. And I do see in your documents too, clearly you are working directly with the schools and you already have agreements signed and an understanding between schools. Clearly you understand too what the needs are.
Yes.
And then I also saw that you have hired someone who has developed CTE programs in the past and understands what the standards do.
Yes, we hired a contractor who has helped develop the program standards that we've already have completed, actually ready to submit. I myself have a clear CTE credential, and I'm going to be very soon being the program director for the CTE program there.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Alavi?
I would like to make a motion to move for approval of a provisional approval for Alameda County Office of Education.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Commissioner Hind has seconded. Any further discussion? So we'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So this is a nice segue into CTE. Item 5G is the update on the work group on career technical education. This item is being presented by Bob Liu? It's Bob Liu, right? Bob Liu? Locks. Oh, wow.
Fine.
Oh, no, it's okay. I knew it was something that was just counterintuitive. And Jake Schuler. This is an information item. Mr. Locks, will you please begin?
Good morning, Commissioners. This agenda item is an update on the ideas of the CTE work group and potential next steps to improve CTE delivery and the teacher shortage. With the college and career indicators that the CDE has developed for school accountability and the increase in CTE funding, the CTE teacher shortage continues to increase. Since 2015, CTC has met with various CTE stakeholders to explore ideas regarding increasing the supply of CTE teachers, needing to ensure a combination of industry experience and effective teaching skills has been a contentious point, with some wanting the teaching skills requirements to be relaxed and others wanting the work experience requirements to be relaxed in order for the number of CTE teachers to increase. At the June 2018 Commission meeting, the Commission instructed the staff to form a CTE work group to again tackle these issues, with its charge being to identify possible approaches to addressing the issues and challenges related to the CTE shortage. With more than 170 applicants, we felt all interest groups were well represented. The group met 4 times in the first months of 2019. They focused on identifying specific challenges or areas of concern with the intent that a representation of CTE advocates, educators, and industry experts could be convened at a later date to attend to the identified concerns that the Commission deemed needed to be addressed.
Okay, so the work group developed ideas in the following 3 areas. CTE credentialing, CTE teacher workforce recruitment and retention, and industry partnerships with CTE programs. The full text of each of these ideas is included within the item. And as Bob mentioned, there were over 170 applicants for the work group. So after the final meeting of the 30 selected work group members, which included two of the commissioners, Commissioner Klatt and Commissioner Kung, the staff developed a survey to send out to the entire field of applicants, as well as to representatives of each approved CTE program in the state. And the survey asked interested parties to indicate their level of support on moving forward with each of the work group ideas. The results of the survey were very high, indicating a high level of support for the majority of work group ideas, with only a few ideas receiving a mean level of support below 4.2 out of 5. And a 5 on the survey indicated a level of strongly support. So given the widespread support of the work group ideas, Commission staff is presenting 2 of the ideas today for possible further action. These are ideas that are within the purview of the Commission and include efforts that staff could begin work on shortly. Those ideas that are not suggested in the item today for immediate follow-up would likely require the actions of other bodies, such as the legislature, the state board, or perhaps federal bodies even. The first area that staff recommends moving forward on is a joint effort between the Commission and staff at the California Department of Education to develop consistent guidance for CTE programs and for CTE employers throughout the state in order to help create consistency on the acceptable ways to meet the current CTE industry work experience requirements. So this effort will include also the Commission staff not only helping to issue guidance, but also to help facilitate conversations between programs and between employers on these requirements. The second area is the creation of industry-informed competency requirements. This is a topic that's come up numerous times, and it came up many times with the work group. Currently, all 15 sectors have identical 3,000-hour requirements to be eligible for the preliminary CTE credential. An effort to create these industry-informed competencies would bring together veteran CTE educators as well as industry representatives to discuss the appropriate knowledge, skills, and abilities needed for a new CTE teacher. Staff is proposing to start with 4 industry sectors related to STEM careers as a pilot effort, then would move to the other 11 industry sectors once those 4 have been addressed. These 4 industries include engineering and architecture, health science and medical technology, information and communication technologies, and energy, environment, and utilities. That concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer questions that you have.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Annie Johnston. I represented the University of California at Berkeley on the CTE working group with the commissioners and many people from the CSUs, from CTE programs around the state. I work there for the Graduate School of Education and the College and Career Academy Support Network. I appreciate the work that the CTC staff has done on this effort. This has been a really important push forward for CTE that needed to happen, and the work of the committee members. This work is very complicated and it's critical. Preparing all students for college and career requires changing paradigms and revisiting the value our schools place on career education. Today's CTE is not the old vocational ed approach that tracks students into inequitable futures. Today's CTE integrates academic and career education and leads around developing real-world applications of academic content. Today's CTE engages students with relevant projects and problem-based curriculum that connects them to future goals and career options. To build pathways to 21st century careers into schools, we need CTE teachers whose experience, skills, and breadth of knowledge can prepare students for the range of pathways and career opportunities within an industry sector. The working group formed to address the shortage of such teachers, particularly in the high-demand STEM and health fields. So I especially want to appreciate the recommendations that were made for moving forward by the CTC staff, the highlighting of those areas. The work experience, a new ICT CTE teacher, that's Information and Communication Technology CTE teacher, requires to be able to teach high school students in courses that meet CTE standards looks very different from the work experience new patient health pathway teachers require. The specific competencies those teachers need to have should be clearly delineated with industry input. I would caution, however, that those new teachers will also need pedagogical competencies. That's why I would like to suggest you consider what might be done about recommendations H and I under recruiting and retention. Putting CTE teachers into classrooms based on their industry competencies alone, with rare access to minimal mentoring, that's widespread current practice. It grows out of disrespect. CTE teachers have historically been assigned to work with students who were not expected to go to college. As they were deemed less important, so too were their teachers. Why are districts not mandated to provide CTE teachers with an induction period, or with access to effective, consistent mentoring and supports? This is a remnant of that historic disregard of their students. If we are to prepare all students for equitable access to post-secondary education or training, this must be remedied. In the 21st century college and career pathways we are building, CTE serves everyone. A mandated induction program should provide new CTE teachers with substantive mentoring and support as they enter the profession, which research has shown will substantially improve teacher retention. Professional development should include externships to bring current applications to classrooms, to projects, and to pathway teams. With a supportive introduction to teaching, CTE teachers should be able to clear their credential by the end of their second or third year with an Ed TPA, which would raise their professional standing. There is a national CTE education TPA in development now by Pearson and Stanford's Scale. As staff noted, this combination of efforts could result in alternate approaches to demonstrating CTE competencies rather than solely relying on an hour count. It is essential to acknowledge, however, that industry experience is not all we want CTE teachers or a definition of CTE teacher competencies to assess. Dean Cheryl May of California State LA's Charter College of Education, who also served on the committee and was not able to be here today, asked me to raise a concern with which I also concur. The committee to identify those competencies should also include linked learning experts who understand the key role of CTE teachers in effective college and career pathways. I would add that it should include teacher educators with expertise in STEM pathway development. Finally, I want to appreciate the commitment of the CTEC staff to providing more effective statewide guidance to the field around work experience requirements. There's tremendous promise in that work. With clear guidelines, we could mobilize consistent documentation. We could have we already do have an untapped pool of potential STEM teachers, single subject, CTE, and dual credentialed teachers in the STEM pathways. That's where those teachers are now in high school and community college and CSU and other institutions of higher education STEM pathways. That's where we have to pull them from, where tens of thousands of students are getting valuable industry experience in high school, in those community colleges, and while attending those four-year institutions. If we could consistently document that experience using these statewide expectations, far more potential teachers will have the CTE credential option, as well as the dual CTE and single subject credential options, which would be extremely valuable in schools that are trying to build pathways and need dual credential teachers. Dean Sherrill may also ask me to convey that Cal State LA has begun working with students on CTE single subject dual credentialing and is collaborating with LA County Office of Education on increasing the number of CTE eligible STEM teachers. LACOE is anxious to develop a regionally aligned system for documenting work experience as students move through their career pathways, and there's collaboration happening between the K-12, the community colleges, and the CSU to develop that. Thank you very much for granting me this time to address you and for your attention to this thorny but essential equity issue.
Thank you so much. Dr. Johnston, thank you for your comments and for serving on the committee as well. Appreciate your expertise and your passion, which is what I wanted to say yesterday to Danette also. Thank you. So public comment is now closed, and commissioners, we open this up for comments or questions. And just to remind you, this is an information item. Yes, Commissioner.
Just a comment, as a high school counselor, CTE is just so important, and so I'm so glad that the commission is working on this, especially in my area. CTE is where a lot of my students are getting their jobs. And for years, it was like, if you're not going to 4-year, you're nothing, which for years I would tell a student, they would tell me, oh, I just want to be a welder. I said, well, really? You get certified enough, you're going to make $90 an hour. You're going to make more than I make, so way more. And there's just an article the other day in the newspaper about a former student, not in my area, but a student who welders are out there making $150,000. And they're coming back to teach other students. So this is so crucial. CTE is very crucial. If you read the reports, the jobs of the future are not all about getting a 4-year degree. They're in areas that don't require the 4-year degree, but that doesn't mean that they're not as important. So I'm so glad this is moving forward. As well as we all know with the dashboard, CTE is a crucial part of the dashboard. And I know several districts, including mine, are all freaking out about how we're going to meet the CTE requirement, which is good, but it's also bad, because I don't want to just see kids forced into a path to meet the color on the dashboard. They should truly be following their passion, not so that districts are freaking out that they're going to get a ding because they don't have enough CTE completers. But in the same token, if you don't have the CTE teachers, they don't even have that opportunity. So I think it's going to be very interesting getting through this dynamic, getting more CTE teachers. I think the people in the field are important, but I agree they need to have the education part that goes with it, but I'm just excited to see where this goes, but I'm also concerned about this whole concern about, well, we don't have enough CTE completers, so we're going to get a ding from the state, and then now we're not blue or red or green or whatever the color is, but it is a thing out there now, so it's part of that. So moving forward with CTE teachers will be great, but at the same time, we're in this weird flux of we got to have so many completers, so.
Commissioner Martinez and then Commissioner Clatton.
All great points, thank you. And thanks to the person who provided the testimony as well, and talking about how CTE has changed. And so I think that's my question or wondering as we move forward with this work is how will we ensure that we're reflecting kind of the new standards in CTE, not just with regard to academic rigor, but really the mid-skill gap jobs, right? So there's a lot of studies out there on the economy, and there's a lot of studies very similar to, Commissioner Barnes is talking about in terms of income, but also a lot of times our CTE programs are still a pipeline to some of the lower paying jobs and not these new high skill jobs. And then also my other part with CTE is how are we going to look at this to just ensure that rigor and the more kind of modern, CTE 2.0, but also ensuring that we have the teachers for those newer type of CTE programs and to then partner with the community colleges around that as well.
Thank you for the presentation and for the comments from the public. Having attended the work meetings, I just want to say thank you for bringing to us in the item some clear things we can do, because there were so many ideas and so many just different areas of expertise brought to the work groups, and so many of the suggestions I thought were good, but were so far outside what our purview of what we can do. And I don't want to dismiss those ideas. They were great ideas, but they were just things that would involve either legislation, local bargaining issues, things, about the A to G system, kind of getting back to Commissioner Barnes talking about kind of these high school options, part of that struggle too with making the A to G requirements fit, and how do we put that, and how does that relate to the dashboard and career tech ed? So thank you for taking this huge pile of suggestions that you received and bringing to us something that we can try to move forward on. And I just wanted to echo also the comments about induction, because I should have probably known this, but I'll admit I was surprised at the work group meeting when I learned that CTE teachers don't go through an induction program when they get their credentials. And I think that could be one way that we can ensure that that the fear that we are, the teachers, that balance of work hours and then the preparation, the pedagogy, that an induction program could maybe help us achieve that balance. So thank you for your work with the work group.
Which was exciting to hear from Alameda before this, because it kind of ties together nicely. Commissioner Brown?
It's about time, and I'm so glad that you guys have done the work that you've done. I have to say, as a member of the community colleges, I was really disappointed that out of the 170 applications, there was not one person from the community colleges on the work group. I'm also have to say that I was disappointed to see that of all the ideas being strongly supported, one of them was not streamlining the process for college faculty to earn a CTE credential. I just have to put that out there, because one of the things I know about community college is it's very involved in CTE and has been the bedrock of CTE preparation for decades as an institution of higher education, and B, is doing really key work in the areas of strong workforce dollars being used to help develop dual enrollment, in which students who are high school students are getting the A to G work at the same time they're getting credit for a community college lower division course. So there are lots of students there who didn't see themselves as college material and may have had an idea of something in the CTE world and thought, well, that's all I'm going to do, that are now turning around and taking courses. For instance, in my field, in early childhood, they're taking child development courses and saying, I could do this. I could go to college and I could consider becoming a teacher in ways that haven't happened before. And I really want to thank Annie for her work on the committee, and we've done work before together. So I would really like to see the work that we're starting to really involve, thank you, Monica, to be collaborative with the community colleges. I know it's complicated, but the people that are teaching the CTE coursework at community colleges now have significant teaching experience as well as their industry or area expertise. And while I know it's complicated, as you said, each system wanted to relax the other's requirements, and neither one of them wants to do that. I do think that it's such a good opportunity for students, and so I hope that happens going forward.
Commissioner Kuhn, and then Executive Director Sandy.
Okay. I think Commissioner Klatt summarized it really well of what happened at the meeting, and I want to thank Bob and Jake for this, as well as I want to also echo the public comment from Annie Johnson that, I think that all these ideas are great, and I think we should move forward with this, and that also that we really should think about induction for people who get the CTE credential, so that, one, it helps retention, and it develops pedagogy for these teachers.
I was caught up in Commissioner Brown's passionate discussion of the role of the community colleges, which is, I appreciate that on the table. I think it's a really important component of how we think about the workforce in career technical education. Also really intrigued and would love to have a longer conversation with Dr. Johnson, as is our norm, about some of the ideas she put on the table. And I'm just wondering about the role of the teaching performance assessment as an equalizer, and whether that's a viable suggestion even for community college faculty. I mean, and whether right now community college faculty can teach career tech ed courses if they're dual or concurrently enrolled. But that's a condition that not all CTE courses are designed to meet. But I'm just wondering about the role of a TPA in that larger community. How viable is that for community college faculty? How viable is it for the industry, pure industry, 3,000 hours of experience plumber? Just a question for y'all.
Commissioner Sloan?
This is a great conversation. So many smart comments. In our efforts to move forward, you've identified two particular things that you will do in collaborating with CDE, and then the second one in collaborating with industry partners and veteran CTE educators to develop these industry-informed competencies. I am also struck by the comments by Professor Johnson and Commissioner Martinez and Commissioner Barnes and others about 21st century CTE and pathways into professions where students may go entirely through a CTE pathway. And what is it that we want them to know and understand and be able to do at the end of that? And I am thinking about our aspirations for young people in four-year colleges around learning to think, around learning to learn, around all of these things that I would certainly want all students to have access to, even if they're not going to a four-year college. And so I am wondering about number two, collaborating with industry partners and veteran CTE educators, but also could it be higher education faculty in some way, shape, or form who might help shape this 21st century way of thinking about educating in a CTE pathway, perhaps? I think the work group would have a better sense of who could be a part of that. The second thing that I am also thinking about is I think we should add, as Executive Director Sandy and Commissioner Brown was saying, something, make sure that our community college partners are informing our work here as well. So not just the CTE educators, but the community college partners who are providing these programs and can help us really think about what we need to be doing. The last thing I will say is I was also particularly intrigued by the argument around professionalizing this pathway and what that means for thinking about students who are in this pathway and thinking about teachers who are in this pathway. And we're always running, the challenge of increasing requirements and professionalizing the work while at the same time making it feasible. But I really think that just like all of the other credential pathways that we have, when we're so focused on quality for good reason. So keeping that in mind, and I appreciate that Professor Johnson pointed us to the H&I bullets in the recruiting and retention piece. I just want to make sure we're continuing to think about the professionalization of that, as it also raises how we think about students in that pathway too. So thank you for all of you at the table, on the work group, and the two of you for this work. This is super important and exciting. It is definitely an area that we really need to focus energy. So glad we are. Thanks.
Commissioner Barnes, did you have a?
Just going to make a little quick comment on what Chair Sloan was saying about the students and having them be forward thinkers and it's interesting to me seeing some of my students striving to get to the four-year college and some of my CTE pathway students and the huge difference in the forward thinking, the communication skills, the being able to communicate with people, because in these CTE courses, pathways, they have to talk to people, they have to communicate, they have to do interpersonal skills. My nursing students are out there in an internship. My welding students are out there in an internship. My ag kids are having to talk to people, where some of my awesome A through G kids, they're just all about their grade, getting into college. They don't have any interpersonal skills or soft skills, as a lot of the business people are saying. Students are lacking soft skills, they're lacking communication skills, because they're just this is their life. I mean, this is how they break up, this is how they ask you to prom, this is how they do everything. But my CTE students who are out there in the real world doing real world things, they have those skills. So it just struck me when you said, and how you talked earlier about when the kids get to college, what do you want them to know? I think our CTE students are a step ahead in that aspect, because maybe they didn't take AP. That's okay. They don't have to, but they can communicate. And I actually think they're going to be more successful than some of my 4.0s who don't know how to have a conversation, and they're so focused on the grade. And then I worry about them more than my CTE students.
Thank you for that. That's so true. And I just, without beating the drum too much, this dual enrollment piece has been so promising, and just a little slice. As I said, we have students now who said, I didn't think I could go to college, and now I think I can. But at my college alone, the 5 areas of dual enrollment are at the different high schools, because they get to they decide what dual enrollment they want their students to have, are biotech, child development, automotive, allied health, and computer science. So that's a pretty broad spectrum. That's who called it CTE 2.0, 21st century CTE. And those students, I think, they are the next generation, and I'm really glad to see that happening in high school. So if this could be another way to keep this going, I think it would be great. Thank you.
Commissioner Alavi?
Yeah, it might be an interesting discussion for another day about who we place on these committees and how we want to balance them out. I'm not that anybody who's listed shouldn't have been at the table, because I think they all should have. But my thought is that we're a little industry light. It looks to me like you've only got, well, I could be wrong here because I'm trying to decide, California Manufacturing and Technology Association. And I think that, so you're going to get, I know we're all about teaching, we're going to be teacher heavy, but in the case of CTE, it might be nice to have just a little bit more representation from our manufacturing and our pathway industries, is what I'm thinking.
Can I? Yeah. That was our original intent, was to have a strong industry representation there. They were very reluctant to accept our invitations, and we actually talked to, as we talked to the work group about it, some of them had said that they had, in other groups, had worked with industry before, and industry had started to become frustrated because they'd put the time in, and then a year later they'd say nothing had changed. So that was one of our big things, our big motivations, why we want to make sure that we can change something, and then we're going to pull industry, or make sure we have everything set up to change, and then pull industry in to kind of get their expertise on how we can really guide that.
I don't know. That sounds like we're kind of bringing the cart behind the horse, or in front of the horse. But I don't know how they can be a part of it. If you design the system and then say, now we've designed a system, please fit into it, they may not feel they have a voice at the table.
Can I enter? Oh, sorry, Madam Chair. I just was going to say that I think this work group was about identifying the issues, not yet about designing. I think they've identified issues, and what's next is to begin to design. And we've been at this. I mean, we had a robust report on this in 2017, a couple of additional updates on this in 2018. We got this work group together because we haven't been able to find a pathway that kind of unites all viewpoints. We've got some real disagreements about what the design should be within the larger community. So it is a walk forward that where we're trying to bring people along. I do believe there were a number of teachers on this group, however, who are CTE teachers. Is that correct? So there were some, we did get some nominations, people who were actually teaching in CTE programs. And we absolutely agree with you that the stakeholder interest groups need to be part of this at the conceptualization and at the review. And we will endeavor in every way to do that.
Commissioner Klatt?
And to follow up with Executive Director Sandy's comments, Commissioner Alvey had similar concerns, and if it helps to know that some of the people here that were from county offices and were from districts were very much, I think, they in their area were the kind of pivot point between the school and between industry. And I think they really were trying to bring forward and speak for the industry partners that they have. So I agree with you, having them at the table would have been nice, but having been at the meetings, I think they did the best they could to represent those voices. And so they were at the tables in spirits in some ways, but you're right, at the table physically might have been better. And actually, while I just also want to make a plug for California Partnership Academies, and I think have been doing the work, and I think could be interesting too to think about for the partnership academies that exist, asking them how credentialing either helps them do what they need to do or creates challenges for them in what they do, because we do have these partnership academies that have been going for a while in our state and having great success. And so that might be a place to look to at how we merge that A to G college career tech issue and find out, are there things that we could do to make California Partnership Academies more accessible for districts to create?
Yes, academies are certainly a few years back when there was actually like funds to get academies started, there was some very powerful work done throughout the state. And I also want to say that linked learning, which was mentioned by Dr. Johnston, is just such a great way to bring everything together. Commissioner Barnes, I loved your comments because, we do have the box checkers, right? Or the GPA checkers that are more interested in the GPA than the learning. And that's something that actually makes me very sad. Because it's the learning, and then sometimes, there is that poo-poo on students who are in a pathway, a CTE pathway, because they're not going to college. However, what they're learning is incredibly valuable. And I think what I've seen from linked learning, it really gives it it's the purpose, right, which should be at the core of all learning that takes place, which makes the student not ask, why are we learning this? Right? Because they're learning with a purpose. And, so I hope that, that makes it back into the conversations for the work group. Commissioner Martinez, I was thinking I think
linked learning is a great point. I think I just want to kind of conclude by just saying how fast this field is moving and how important it is for us to step up, because right now you have Amazon that has curriculum now going into high schools, and they're training current teachers to teach their curriculum. And they really are. I know, but we have to catch up with this, and we have to, linked learning is a great example, the deeper learning, the learning to learn, they do all that. And so it's a balance of both, this industry demand for our students to go straight into the career, and industry now getting so involved in schools, they're doing their own PD for teachers to learn how to teach their curriculum, which is very different than CTE. So I just want to emphasize how quickly we have to move. We have to acknowledge how quickly the field is moving, and it's going to be very hard to stay up with that field.
And there are also people in the private sector and industry who, they lose pay if they're sitting on committees or they're not productive and they have goals to meet. However, because I believe aerospace is one of the industries that is really clamoring for us to be training and educating students to work in that. And a lot of the big aerospace industries in California have education departments. And, perhaps somebody from the education department can represent the industry in the future when we start looking at that. Commissioners, any other comments? No, so this is an information item and very robust discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Laux and Mr. Schuler. And no further action is needed at this time. Okay, so we're going to take a 6-minute break. All right. Yeah, it's 9:56. We'll see you back here at 10:03. Hi, Miranda. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. About 3 times. Okay, thank you for the claps. Okay. So we are on our last educator preparation committee item, and this is item 5H. Excuse me. This item is being presented by Miranda Gutierrez. This is an information item, and it is the plan to review and update the Bilingual Authorization Program standards. Ms. Gutierrez, will you please begin?
Thank you. So as mentioned, this is a plan to review and update the Bilingual Authorization Program standards. The standards were last updated in 2008, and since then, policy changes and state initiatives have increased the conversation around bilingual education. There's the Global 2030 initiative, which seeks to increase dual language immersion programs, bilingual prepared teachers, and bilingual teacher preparation programs. We currently have 35 approved bilingual preparation programs in the state, and there are a number of institutions who've expressed interest in proposing their own program at their institutions. Additionally, back in 2016, the California voters passed Prop 58, which allowed the California schools more flexibility in how they offer their bilingual English learner programs. So with the change in flexibility, how schools can offer bilingual education, bilingual advocates from the field have expressed interest about examining the current bilingual authorization preparation standards to better align with bilingual education that's taking place in the California public schools. So again, the community has expressed the desire to update the standards for the last 2 years, but this wasn't, this staff work didn't allow for this to occur until late 2019 and early 2020. So faculty from the CSU, UC, private colleges, and a retired K-12 practitioner worked together over the last year as a bilingual standards refresh work group. This work group analyzed the current standards to identify what may be missing and what may need to be updated. The group is also developing a statewide district survey with plans to disseminate it to district and site level administrators to gain a better understanding of how they're implementing their bilingual program since the passage of Prop 58. Staff plans to provide this group's analysis of the standards and their recommendations along with the survey results to the formal subject matter content expert group that will be formed in the spring. So beginning next month, staff plans to open up an application process for a bilingual content expert work group. K-12 bilingual teachers, administrators, university faculty, members of language groups, and bilingual experts will be encouraged to apply. Liaisons from the organizations listed on page 2 of the item will be included in the planned work group. Staff anticipates that the group will begin meeting in spring 2020 and meet 3 to 4 times based on staff and work group member availability. The work group will review current research and best practices in bilingual education. They will also identify what knowledge, skills, and abilities should be included in the revised bilingual authorization standards. And as draft standards are developed, staff will bring an update to the Commission for direction and feedback. And this concludes the plan to update the bilingual authorization standards, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So we'll now open for public comment. We don't have any public comment cards, so public comment is now closed. All right, and this is an information item. Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions on this? Okay, Commissioner Jackson?
Yes. I'm looking at the list of potential, like working with the work group and everything, and I know that we spoke with some members over at the department, the California Department of Education, that would be interested in either being liaisons and or part of the work group and everything, so I just wanted to put that out there. So.
Commissioner Hyde?
I just wanted to highlight also about the stakeholder groups. I'm sure that all the stakeholders already have this in the forefront of their mind, but to really encourage them to get out and find people to apply to those positions so that nobody's underrepresented on this work group.
Any other comments or questions?
Hooray. And really, I think all of the suggestions that you put in here and connecting with CDE for sure, and the people who are currently on this work group look very good, and gathering more, another one of these areas where we're really thinking differently now than we did just a few years ago. So really excited. Thank you.
And I just had a curiosity, and I was actually going to email, because I don't know if you have this information, but I was wondering, looking at the Chinese Mandarin, there are 11 bilingual authorizations, it seems like by language, right? And then Spanish, 35. Those were the two that seem to have the highest authorizations. Would you happen to know the geographical area? Like, where in California?
I don't know the geographical area. Off the top of my head, there's some of the larger CSUs that offer the Chinese and Mandarin, as you can see on the list, but that's something I could definitely look up for you. Oh, the data dashboards. You can always look on the data dashboards. If you filter by program, I think it tells you which institutions and where in the state.
That was actually just a plug for our dashboards. This item brought to you by CTC Dashboards. Any other comments or questions? Okay, this is an information item, and no action is needed at this time. Thank you very much, Ms. Gutierrez. So having no additional items, I adjourn the Educator Preparation Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez. Next is the Professional Practices Committee. Commissioner Cooney, will you please convene the committee?
Okay, I will call to order the Professional Practices Committee. We have two items today, both for information, and both presented by Gil Gonzalez, the manager of the division. Mr. Gonzalez, good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm manager with the Division of Professional Practices, and I'll be providing information regarding the monthly workload report, which is an informational item. As part of the audit for 2011, DPP was requested to report information regarding its workload as part of the Commission's agenda. So I report on 6 key measurements for both current and prior year numbers for comparison purposes, and I'll be highlighting the August 2019 workload report. The first graph is the total cases. They are all cases that are open within DPP. And at the end of August, we had a caseload of 2753, which is within the normal range of 26 to 2800 cases. Cases open are new cases received during the month from all sources. During this time period, the Commission tends to receive higher number of applications, and in June, beginning in June and July for a 2 to 4 month period, which typically has a direct impact on our number of cases. So, and as you can see in the graph on cases open, in July we opened 529 cases, and in August 524. So that's above the normal average of 400 to 500. I expect that to decrease in the next few months. The number of cases reviewed by the Committee of Credentials during its 3-day meetings can be seen on the next 2 graphs, and those are required by statute. The committee reviewed 106 initial review cases in August and 76 formal review cases. Cases closed is a matter of cases that were closed during the commission, by commission action, committee action, or delegation received by staff from your body. We closed 400 cases, which is on the lower end of the 400 to 500 average that we do on a monthly basis. AG cases is the last graph. That refers to cases in which an educator requested an administrative hearing to challenge a recommendation made by the committee. The commission is represented by the AG's office in these matters. And at the end of August, we had an increase to 149 cases. Typically, in 18-19, we typically sent over 12 cases per month. So that we had we sent over 21 in July and 16 in August. So that was higher than normal. Again, I expect those numbers to normalize in the next few months. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. We have no public comment cards for this item. Are there any commissioner comments on the monthly report? Not seeing any. We will then go to item 6B, also for information. Mr. Gonzalez, this is the annual workload report.
Okay. Again, we'll be going over the 2018-19 annual report for all cases in the workload that was completed by the division. As you'll see in the report, DPP, legal, the Committee of Credentials, as well as the Commission completed an increased number of cases during the past fiscal year. So I'll just go over some of the highlights of the report. Number of cases open. We began the year with 2,703 cases, and in the last 3 months of the fiscal year, under 2,700 cases. That hasn't happened since January of 2017, when we had 2,671. That's on page 2 on the table. Each of these totals, though, is at the lower end of the range of 2,600 to 2,800 cases. So that's a good thing. Where do these cases come from? By report type. In terms of report type, as shown on top of page 3, the table, we opened, we had a decrease in 9 of the 10 categories, with the largest involving app-wrap cases. That was a decrease of 211, and we had a decrease of 123 on application cases. And school district cases continued to report an increased number of cases compared to early 2012, when the Commission used to receive 200 to 250 reports annually. Starting in February 2012, due to some highly publicized cases of misconduct, the number of school district cases dramatically increased to the levels shown in the table, and which is now currently in the range of 550 to 650 per year. Okay. Credential, going down to page 3, on the bottom of page 3, by designation, cases open by designation. That illustrates that in 2018-19, 3 of the 4 categories decreased when compared to 2017-18. The biggest decline was cases involving first-time applicants, which decreased by 307 cases, while credential holders declined by 119. In looking at the table of applicant cases, that increased for the 4th year in a row, which is not a good. It's not good since we're talking about discipline. What is positive is that app holders declined from a previous high, and first-time applicants declined for a 2nd year in a row. Moving on to types of misconduct on page 4. During the fiscal year, the number of new cases opened by offense type remained relatively consistent with previous years, with the exception of cases classified as alcohol and other crimes, which had decreased by 234 and 213 respectively. Both of these categories, alcohol and other, are the lowest they've been in the past 5 years. Serious crimes kind of stayed normal. That's 944. Those tend to be rape, molest, cruelty to children, that type of thing. Drugs stayed fairly consistent, drug cases, as did child crimes, non-sexual, and child crimes sexual. Number of cases reviewed by the COC. Effective for initial review cases, effective May 13, 2013, DPP management set a target of 90 cases to review, initial review cases for the COC during its 3-day meetings. That was the increase from 45 to 50 cases prior to the audit of 2011. Due to the increased number of cases during 2016-17 and 17-18, staff prepared an average of 95 cases that year. And we eventually increased the goal to 105 in the second quarter of 2018-19. So we had an average of 104 during the year that we've completed. The increased number of cases presented to the COC each month was intended to limit the growth of the overall caseload and limit the number of pending cases before the COC. At the initial stage of the Committee of Credentials can vote to send cases for further review or close cases for any type of legal reason. Regardless, those that are not closed are forwarded to the secondary stage or formal review. That graph is on top of page 5. During the secondary or formal review, individuals can request have an opportunity to request to appear before the Committee of Credentials, and we schedule approximately 30 cases, and that's due to time and workload constraints that the committee has. As you can see in the chart, in 2018-19, we reviewed 877 cases, which is a lot higher than we've done in the past, and that's basically because we reviewed a lot more initial review cases during the fiscal year. The next table is the consent calendar cases. So in addition to initial review and formal review cases, the committee reviews the consent calendar cases, which is similar to the Commission's consent calendar. The committee can pull cases from the calendar and have staff send an LOI if they feel that the allegations warranted. In 2018-19, the COC reviewed 1,221 cases. So given the 3 tables, the initial review, the formal review, and the consent calendar cases, staff prepares a lot of cases on a monthly basis. And this committee reviews quite a few cases during that 3-day period. The workload has been a strain for all parties involved and a difficult task to complete on a month-to-month basis, which has continued for over a year and a half. So, moving on to cases closed by commission delegations to staff, that's on pages 5 and 6. In 2012 and 2013, the commission adopted policies proposed by prior management that delegated authority to staff to close cases that met a very specific criteria. That was done to streamline and review cases in a more efficient manner. The 4 policies, they include single alcohol-related offenses that did not involve children or schools. Staff closed 1,256 cases. No jurisdiction cases involve cases where the commission is unable to obtain formal jurisdiction, which prevents a case from moving forward from the initial review stage. Again, staff closed 682 during the fiscal year. The 3rd policy is vehicle code violation cases. They involve minor infractions or misdemeanors under the vehicle code. These are typically driving without a license or driving on suspended license, so very minor offenses. We closed 62 of those. And the last policy is the expired credential policy. This includes cases where the educator no longer holds a valid credential and has no applications pending. Cases of this type are flagged in the system and reviewed if the individual submits a new application, which means the individual can't teach until the misconduct is reviewed and he or she receives a favorable outcome in their case. There are 4 exceptions to the expired credential. Those are allegations of sexual misconduct, crimes against children and reports filed by school districts, as well as actions taken by other licensing agencies. So the reason for the exceptions are so that they don't, was to prevent individuals with expired credentials to apply for and obtain credentials in other states, which allows them to teach without a review of their misconduct in California. Individuals with misconduct that fall into the above exceptions are reviewed and the adverse action is taken if necessary and reported to NASDAQ, which helps protect students in other states. Staff reviewed and closed 155 cases in last year under the expired credential policy. So the delegations given to staff saves the COC from having to review these amounts of cases and adding to the large volume of cases that are already reviewed on a monthly basis. Moving on to timeliness of action in cases. That's on page 7. As in years past, staff followed a methodology used by the state auditor to measure the timeliness of 30 random cases completed during the fiscal year. While the auditor reviewed cases closed by staff and COC, we reviewed a more rigorous sample that only included cases that went through the COC process. This year we removed one case that was an outlier that involved a delay in receiving criminal records, which was out of our control. So from received a report of misconduct to case opened, that was reduced from 128 days to 6 days. During this time period, we received reports of misconduct, such as cases involving apps and wraps, and those are typically open daily, but there's other school district reports and other reports that we receive, and the volume of reports received, staffing issues, and that kind of thing can make it a longer process for us to open those cases. Case open to first action, which is ordering an initial report or documents. That was reduced from 103 days to 11. At that time, during that time period, intake is creating an automated case file as well as a physical case file and completing other tasks before the cases are assigned to staff members to request records. Third section, from reports of misconduct order to letter of inquiry. Documents are being gathered from various sources, including law enforcement and courts, which are overburdened right now. When we receive new arrest reports in a rap sheet, those are received within a day or two of an individual being arrested. So we have to wait for the disposition of the case before we continue our process. So that can be time, take some time for us to complete. The average time was reduced from 274 days to 205. The next 3, letter of inquiry to 30 days and to date of COC recommendation, those are all standard timeframes that are set in statute and based on the COC and CTC meeting dates. So those are pretty much average and consistent, as you can see from the graph. And the overall total time it took to complete cases was reduced from 683 days to 375, while the median time was reduced from 721 to 359 days. So as indicated in the chart, DPP was made some significant improvements in timeliness when compared to the findings of the BSA audit. I feel we'll continue to achieve these timelines year to year since we have processes and procedures in place to do so. Moving on to page 8, adverse actions. Adverse actions fall into 2 categories: mandatory actions and discretionary actions. Mandatory actions are required by statute. The legislature determined that certain crimes make an individual unfit to be in the classroom with children. They are criminal convictions for specified sex offenses, drug offenses, or other specified crimes that require the commission to mandatorily revoke or deny credentials once staff's collected all documents. Mandatory actions are placed in the commission's consent calendar for information at the next scheduled commission meeting. In 1819, we had 146 mandatory revocations and 36 denial cases. A slight drop off from the previous year. Discretionary actions are actions taken by you, the Commission, in cases where the COC recommended an adverse action. The COC's recommendation may be accepted by the credential holder or applicant, or it may be appealed. On appeal, the administrative hearing is held and before a final action is taken by the Commission. This discretionary table is on page 8, and we had 765 of those during the fiscal year. Request for administrative hearings. As stated in my monthly reports to the Commission, applicants and holders who have been through the COC process and receive a recommended adverse action can request an administrative hearing to challenge a recommendation. Again, the Commission is represented by the AG's office. The number of cases assigned to the AG's office on a month-to-month basis during the past 7 years is listed on the table on page 9. The table shows a steady decrease of cases from 2016-17, when we had 307 cases in April of 2017. And we ended the fiscal year of 2018-19 with 126, which is at equilibrium or better, which was set by the AG's office. Believed the equilibrium would be about 150 cases, so that was a good deal we completed. Moving down to the administrative adjudicative cases. As I previously stated, the Office of Administrative, the AG's office adjudicates the Commission's cases by administrative hearing, default, withdrawal by the educator, settlement, or decline to prosecute. The table shows the labels that we use, which may be different than the AG's office. So decline to prosecute, those are cases where the AG declined to prosecute due to insufficient evidence or other reasons. So they're closed down, and the Commission does not review or see these. There was 11 of those. Consent determination or settlements. These are cases where either the AG and or legal staff identified as proper for settlement, again, because of insufficient evidence or witness issues. There were 107 cases. That was up from the previous year of 74. Proposed ALJ decisions. An actual hearing took place, and the ALJ decisions were presented to you for final action. There were 56 decisions, and so on and so forth. Okay. Top of page 10, OAG investigation request. The Commission's legal and investigation units continue to work collaboratively with the AG's office in reducing the number of AG cases as shown in the previous table. The investigation unit receives requests for assistance from the AG's office that can include locating victims, witnesses, and obtaining affidavits, and any number of other tasks, so they can help prosecute the Commission cases. The investigation unit received 67 requests in 18-19 and completed 81. So we had an ending balance of 5. The AG requests are in addition to to investigations that the unit completes, and they're also monitoring cases of probation cases. So it's quite a caseload for the investigation unit. The last table is petitions for reinstatement. They are applicants that were previously revoked and are trying to show proof during closed session. And they're trying to show rehabilitation and that they deserve their credentials returned. In fiscal year 18-19, the Commission granted 14 and denied 18. Moving forward to highlights and conclusions. DPP's monthly caseload averaged 2,766 cases, but ended the fiscal year with 2,601, which is at the lower end of the 2,600 to 2,800 open cases spectrum. This can be attributed to processing higher number of initial review cases through the COC, the reduction of AG cases, and the fact that we received fewer reports during the year. Due to the increased number of cases open in 16-17 and 17-18, management increased the number of initial review cases presented to the COC in March and again in October of 2018. This resulted in a monthly average of 104 initial review cases assigned to the COC per month. The division's partnership with the OEG continued this fiscal year as the investigative team completed 81 investigation requests. The number of open cases to the OEG declined during the fiscal year and is at equilibrium or better. And DPP maintained significant improvements in timelines timeliness when compared to the 2011 state audit. So moving forward to fiscal year 2019-2020, the number of initial review cases presented to the COC will be reduced to 95, which will be a break for everybody involved, including the commission. And that'll last through the beginning of early 2020, and we'll take a look at the workload at that point and decide whether we should reduce the caseload to 90 cases from our previous numbers that we completed, remain at 95, or implement a new increase based on the workload numbers. So overall, the last year and a half to 2 years was very demanding for DPP staff, legal, the Committee of Credentials, as well as the Commission during your closed session. I'd like to commend the DPP staff for their dedication and ability to take on this challenge and do such an outstanding job for such a long period of time. It wasn't easy. They hung in there, and they did a wonderful job, as did legal and the Committee of Credentials. I'd also like to thank Dr. Sandy for supporting the division and assisting with the staffing issue in the investigation unit. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very thorough. Mr. Gonzalez, thank you. Once again, I'm amazed at how much is going on that we don't see on a regular basis. We kind of sit above the waterline and deal with what comes to us from various sources. But in the meantime, churning away is going on upstairs, and I'm not sure if we could ever get enough investigators to reduce the workload on the investigation units. And we've talked before about the shortages of attorneys. I'm not sure if Ms. Whitnell, do you want to make any comment about the current attorney roster and whether you are continuing to seek additional individuals for that portion of the division?
Just so you know, that question to any director in the agency is going to be absolutely yes.
Well, I'm throwing a softball, but
is the question whether we can survive without more lawyers, or we need lawyers? Yes.
I'm happy to augment that if you'd like. We introduced to you Brandon Hinton yesterday, and that's a new attorney added to the group, and that's been that helps a lot. The workload up there is still up to here, and we continue to document the workload across the agency and talk with the administration about how to best support it. You'll note in the budget report you received yesterday from Michelle Peralt the number of hours that we use temp help and what's the word I'm looking for? Overtime and temp help, but people we bring in who are they're not contractors, but they're employees, they're temporary employees. Pardon? Retired annuitants. Yeah, there's a word, and what's the word? Permanent intermittent. Thank you. It was a technical term. Thank goodness. And we've got a high use of that strategy to fill needed areas within the agency. So just giving you a little bit of vamp time there, General Counsel, if you'd like to add anything.
One of your highlights is that we're going to go forward by reducing the number of cases reviewed by the committee on a monthly basis.
Correct.
And that's obviously a decision that will need close watching, because what we don't want on the other end is for our times from initial review to disposition to start increasing again. And I know that's the reason we increased to well over 100 cases a month, but we can tell from our part of the caseload that comes to us on a regular basis that there is a limit on how much can be dealt with in a single meeting, and for us, and projecting that back on the workload, it seems to me that we have to find that in-between spot, unless we're going to come up with a different system other than monthly meetings of the Committee of Credentials. But other commissioners may have comments or questions for our leaders. Commissioner Klatt?
This is just a comment. I think a number not represented in the report is, at least since I've been here, our closed sessions have gone later and later and later into the evening. And I just want to thank staff for your patience and your willingness to answer our questions. And I think we have lots of questions and lots of deliberation. And there's a whole team that has to stay here late with us when we stay late at night. And so thank you for always being professional and giving us your expertise and never making us feel like we have to rush through those really difficult conversations that we have that, again, I think keep getting longer and we keep having more and more and more of them. So thank you. Because I know you want to get home. It's a long day for you too. So I appreciate that you stay here late into the night with us.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yes, I'd like to echo your comments. And also, while it's not on the agenda, I just want to put it out there that we may want to discuss the possibility of, like we have, I'm the liaison to the accreditation committee, having a liaison, if not for the whole 4 days, but somebody that could come in and sit with the COC for just, sort of like to bridge information, and I think that would be very helpful.
Any other comments, Commissioner Sloan?
I'm going to just ask some boring clarifying questions just because I'm curious. On page 3, the table with respect to new cases opened by report type. So you explained that the school districts in the Office of Ed, in 2012 we saw a spike in that for a number of reasons, and now it's evened out. It looks like at around this number. I was curious about the category of breach of contract and affidavit and complaint. Would breach of contract seems like it would come from a school district?
That also comes from school district, correct?
So you just taken them out of the school district Office of Ed?
Right.
Or?
The school district cases tend to be 80303 and 80304 cases, reports of misconduct of that type.
Okay. And then breach of
contract
you take out.
Category, right.
And likewise, the affidavit and complaint. Does that usually come from a school district, or?
Those are typically from parents and
okay.
the public itself.
Okay. And I did just want to point out the breach of contract piece. Interestingly, we had suddenly seen this spike right around the teacher shortage time, I think, when teachers were suddenly getting hired and better offers at other places and didn't maybe understand the consequences and of what that meant. And it looks like we're seeing that come down now too, which I think is a good, potentially, I don't know what the explanation is, but a response by preparation programs and others to inform new teachers of their obligations in this regard. Right. So that looks good to me. Those were just, one other question. What's the difference between an arresting agency opening a new case versus a rap sheet?
We receive a direct report from a police department, and that doesn't come. Those don't come on rap sheets itself. So we're just notified by an arresting agency that this occurred. Is my understanding of it.
Okay. Thank you.
I see we had our first case of state test misconduct this past year, as opposed to the previous 4 years.
Right.
And do you always track that, or is that something new forced by this?
Oh, okay. We've had them in the past, and right, those do typically come from in an affidavit type form, and I'm not sure what happened here.
Okay.
So that's where typically.
Okay, it's not that
Not that
there's
that's
only
the
one
only
instance
right.
of misconduct,
Right.
just one.
Somebody at the testing agency saw the misconduct, reported it via an affidavit. So it's just a matter of how we categorize them.
Right. Other comments or questions from commissioners? Okay, then. Thank you very much. You had something else, Mr. Russell?
I might not seem like I'm excited about these numbers, but I am. So take it for what it is.
You're excited.
I'm excited.
Okay. I'm glad you
My wife
clarified
can't tell
that.
during Christmas either, so.
That's great. Commissioner Sloan.
I do have one more comment. I know everybody in this agency works really, really hard, but I also, being chair, get a little bit more information about the kinds of hours that some of the people in your division keep. And so I just encourage you to think about balance and quality of life, and as well as thanking you. But it is, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Of course.
We have this year separated the Division of Professional Practices from the legal office. So you see two people at the table who represent two distinct offices now in the agency, and there are a lot of reasons that we did that. Their work is very coordinated and collaborative. Obviously, they're working to move all of the discipline work forward, but they have very different functions in DPP, where investigations and all of the documentation begins, and in legal, where the legal analysis intersects with that. So just so you understand who's at the table and you know what that they are directing different aspects of this work now. And it is an extraordinary team of people who are really dedicated every single day to the protection of school children and the protection of school teachers. They really carry a heavy load there to move this work forward. They go through some of the most disturbing material you might imagine, and all of you have a deep understanding of what that might be. But they do it extremely professionally, and they don't ever shirk the work. And I'm really very proud of the team that brings this report to you, and really quite happy to see a little bit of a relief in the numbers. I mean, we're not going to ever go back to the numbers that are, 5-8 years ago. I don't think. Would that we could, but I don't see that happening. The trends here are not indicating that. But that this group is managing it as well as they are is really credit to who they are and what they bring.
I certainly agree with those comments. Being close to the legal staff and the work that is going on and being presented. On a normal basis, the staff is working long hours, much like the busiest law firm in the state. And that's not usual in my experience of government attorneys. We have an exceptional legal staff, and the work is not only emphasized by the time they put in, but by the quality of analysis that they bring to the table every single day and evening. Right now, it's particularly difficult. A couple of attorneys are out on leave, and the only place to transfer that caseload for the time being is to Ms. Whitnell, who every single day comes in here and sets the standard of good work, long hours, and I just want to share that with the commission. I have the privilege of talking with her regularly. I know she's going to do the work whether we compliment her or not, but at least the commission ought to be aware of it. And I certainly want to express on behalf of the commission our thanks to the entire divisions for their dedicated help. Okay, I think that concludes, unless there are any final questions or comments. Let's call the meeting of the Professional Practices Commission adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. I'd like to reconvene the general session and move to agenda item 2H, report of closed session items. Commissioner Hein will read the closed session report.
All right. The Office of the Attorney General briefed the Commission on the pending litigation matter of Emily Ismail versus CTC, and no reportable action was taken. Staff briefed the Commission on the matter of an appeal before the State Personnel Board, case number 19-1012, and no reportable action was taken. The Commission granted the following petitions for reinstatement: Ponchita Beckham, Donovan Doyle, Dwayne Flanagan, Ellen Shoemaker. The Commission denied the following petitions for reinstatement: Jennifer Foley. The Commission rejected the proposed decision in the matter of Matif Hermakis and called for the transcript. The Commission adopted the decision and order in the matter of Margarito Mendueno. The Commission discussed consent calendar items number 6, Anne Marie Blevins, number 37, Rachel Kamaya, number 47, Ruben Martinez, number 50, Dan McQuigg, number 57, Salvador Navarro, number 63, Todd Potter, number 73, Jeremy Severin, number 78, Lauren Trathen, and accepted the recommendation of the Committee on Credentials. The Commission discussed the following consent calendar items and remanded the matters back to the Committee of Credentials. Number 4, Keith Baxter, number 31, John Hoffmeyer, number 33, Kendra Huff, number 35, Kenneth Ingersoll, and number 39, Timothy Cron.
Thank you, Commissioner Hind. Next is agenda item 2I, report of the Executive Committee. The Executive Committee appointed Lindsay Baladoy to serve as the Educator Preparation Student Liaison to the Commission for 1 year, beginning October 1st, 2019. All right. Next, we have item 2J, which is new business. The bi-monthly agenda is presented for information. Yes?
Commissioners, I just wanted to remind you that next month, our last meeting of the year, is the time when we have our annual election of chair and vice chair. So just a heads up, that will be one of the early items of business in November.
Thank you. I now open for audience presentations. I have one card. Would Jane Robb please come to the table?
Good morning. Jane Robb, California Teachers Association. It really struck me listening to the work over the last 2 days that it's time. I would like to request that you review the policy and practice that you've had on agenda items. It's pretty pro forma for most commissions and boards to have a statement of financial implication for action that you're undertaking. If you look at many school boards, State Board of Education, and I realize your revenue sources are a little bit different, but I think it really helps everybody think about, when you're undertaking a new initiative, what are the long-term fiscal implications? So I'm not talking paragraphs, we're talking sentence kind of thing. Because I think it helps clarify. We're hearing, I just sitting here for 2 days and hearing the complexity and the timelines and the urgency of so many not competing, but necessary work to undertake. I think it would be helpful as a member of the public, and also in thinking through what comes first, what comes second, just to have that as a routine thing, just, as a part of the agenda, a statement of financial implication of the work that you're undertaking. So that's just a request for you to look at that. I know it's been up for discussion before in prior years, but it might be time to look at that again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other audience presentations? Nope. Seeing none, I now adjourn the September. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Rodriguez.
Thank you. It's not an audience presentation, but it is a thank you to Officer Rosendale, who's back there. Because he, it's always nice to have CHP here with us. However, and he's not listening, but he was telling Rhonda this morning, and then told me that he's a teacher, and he's a social studies teacher. So he said he was really excited to be here because this is very dear to his heart. The commission itself, the CTC, this building, and so then I was thinking Academy, CTE.
Yeah.
Anyway, just want to extend my gratitude because he's just been so interactive, and as student representative, Shub can attest to the fact that he had people go around, and so it was just really very exciting to see him at work and so passionate about being here.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez, and thank you, Officer Rosendale. Thank you. Service. Yes, appreciate it. All right, any other comments? With that, I now adjourn the September 2019 meeting of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. The next meeting is November 21, 2019. Thank you.